Every day, we can experience a full range of emotions, from joy to grief, peace, frustration, and everything in between.
But we're still expected to be an A player at work, be a good partner, to parent children, take care of our animals, and have food on the table, even in the throes of grief. So how the hell are we supposed to do it all?
On the Human Sessions podcast, we'll guide you through strategies for being your authentic self in every part of your life, no matter which emotions are in the driver's seat that day. We'll talk about how human design, energy, and Reiki can all be useful tools for showing up and showing up well.
And if we lost you at the word energy, I promise you will walk away from every episode with tactical tips to feel more like yourself.
I'm Rachel Hatterberg-Walt, human energetics expert and Reiki master.
And I'm Val Marini, grief and trauma specialist and energy healer. This is a no bullshit zone.
This is an anti-perfectionism haven.
This is the Human Sessions podcast. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us today. For today's Human Session episode, we are actually going to share parts of a conversation that we had with someone who is very dear to us. We spoke a little bit about her in the first episode that we dropped because we had recorded this earlier. But Angie is, she's fire, man. She is full fire, full-throated fire every day, all day, publicly. But there's a lot, like for all of us, there's a lot of layers behind that. And there's like a reason for it. There's personality reasons that are like who she is and who she needs to be and what the world needs from her. And then there was just conditioning that she has spent a lot of time working through. And I had the pleasure, and we'll talk a little bit about it in the conversation, I had the pleasure of actually meeting her over a decade ago. I was doing some contract work for a company, and before my contract was up, she walked over and she was like, "You're going to work for me." And I was terrified, fully terrified, because it was both the invitation that I needed and the invitation that I didn't want, because she is so good at the things that I was able to observe in the workplace. And she was so strong and she was so tough that it was like, I knew inherently that I was going to have to like up my game in areas that I was probably hiding from and I didn't necessarily want to be challenged in. And what is beautiful about that relationship is that the soft side that made me afraid was what she ended up leaning into, and that made her afraid in her own ways, not the same way as me. I felt like it was like a gladiator moment when I describe it. I'm like, yeah, she told me to meet her in an office, and I was like gladiator walking into the arena, just like urinating down my leg. Like, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of here alive. But I did. And from that, we spent 10 years working where I sometimes worked for her. I always felt like she was like my mom at work. She was my leader, even when I had another leader, and he would not argue one single second of this, that like we both kind of reported to her, even when she reported to him. So she is just very, very impressive, but had found her way in that arena very early and started finding her way in this area in just her own human development work, her human energetics. She then found human design with Rachel. And I don't know how it worked out 100%, but I knew it was supposed to work out 100% because then Rachel and I aligned and landed here. So I will toss it over to you to talk a little bit about how Angie entered your world and what that's meant to you.
Yeah, Angie and I met at a goal-setting conference where I was doing a Reiki meditation for the group and connected energetically there. And she came over to my table where I was doing some mini readings, and we did a mini reading, and she was like, holy shit, like, let's do this. So her and her friend and I had mimosas on a Friday morning and dove into their human design. And it was truly magical. We had the best time, and just the layers of awareness just flew off. She resonated with her chart so deeply. And she has this energetic called the genius freak, quote unquote, where it gives her a unique perspective to be able to go into systems, carry a vision, be on the forefront of innovation, creation, just being the first one to do stuff. And I have never seen someone so embodied in that mission
100%.
to be able to as we talk about in this episode, go from, being a conditioned type of a leader and doing it as the way she saw it to now have transformed her leadership style because she knows who she is and she embodies that unapologetically. And it's balanced more in her energy. She's softer, but she's way more effective when she's bringing in all sides of her. And she has totally radically changed the dynamics in a major global office. And so it's really interesting to see. I think you're going to gain a lot from this conversation about leadership styles, about what it means to be a female leader in a global corporation, and some of the dynamics you have to mess with.
What it meant before and what it can mean going into the future.
That's right. So I hope you enjoy. I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of this. Please let us know what you think about it after the episode.
When you are actually in your consciousness and you're paying attention, you're like, oh, I can see this coming down the path. And then this unexpected thing comes in and you just kind of sit back in your chair and you're like, this is interesting, harrowing, but interesting.
Yes.
And I think we're all kind of there.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been some developments on my front too at work as well.
Gosh.
Oh, yeah.
I can't wait to hear about this.
Yes. It's
like in a hopeful way. Are you feeling hopeful?
In a hopeful way.
Okay.
It's big.
Oh.
It's big.
Oh, that just gave me chills, Angie.
Yeah, me too, actually.
That could also mean anything. That's what's exciting. And I'm like, I could probably inventory in my brain like 10 things it could be, and it's probably none of them.
Yeah, maybe. Right. I mean, we've
They're
talked
out there
about,
in the field of possibility.
Yeah, we've talked about why me, why now, right? And the theme through the 2-day offsite was leadership style, culture and leadership style. And everything that they said is what I do. They asked if there were any questions, and I had not asked a single question the whole 2 days, which is completely unusual for me.
Yeah.
So it's the final minutes of the final day, and I'm like, I have a question. And I can see them. Like, it's like I'm in the back of the room and they're literally where you are. There's no obstruction between our lines of sight. And they're like, oh, you're just going to throw us an easy one, right? I was like, this is not going to be an easy one.
That's my style, right?
They knew. And I said, would love to be that leader, but right now don't feel safe being that leader. Yeah. So you need to do something about it.
Totally.
And they said, it's HR.
Oh my God, I'm covered in chills.
It's
Angie.
HR. And we know we have to fix it. And we know Angie is especially bad in London.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yes. And HR was in the room.
Oh, whoa. That was a huge breaking point.
Huge.
That's a big deal.
Shaking it up.
That's what
and it's also
but
it's also that like same what we're talking about, like the cultural shift where we experienced for the last like 10, 15 years where it became so clear it wasn't human resources, it was corporate resources.
Yes.
And the shift back to the human, the shift back to the collective.
Yes.
The awareness that we now have.
It's humanity is excellence. That's what they want. They want there to be a human aspect to all of this, but they also recognize that not all humans are the right humans. And so you have to act, decisively and quickly, right? But you have to take all the appropriate steps to get there, right? You have to give them the feedback and the coaching and the setting the expectation. And I'm like, yeah, but we can't be that direct, right?
Well, and creating the environment to allow people to be the leaders that they're meant to be, and then be intentional and conscious about who you're pairing together, what projects you're putting them on, and not trying to shove everyone through this one tunnel that they've been doing.
That's right. And that's what they talked about a lot as well. So it was interesting,
Yeah. It's also
Angie,
like
you are like a little dandelion through the cracks of a sidewalk. Spreading your little dandelion seeds, breaking through.
When I walked up and talked to him separately, and I said, I need some help, right? And he's like, what are you talking about? You need help? When I think of Atlas holding the world up,
That's right. That's right.
If Atlas was a woman, it would be you. And I said, that's quite flattering, but even Atlas needs some help. Angie needs some help, right?
Atlas has a foundation.
Well, like with that, it's also so important because typically like the top-down lack of human consciousness or lack of alignment or all of those things, usually, I mean, when you talk about senior leadership and the level that you're at and the level that you've actually been at for a long time, most people are like already baked in the way that they're going to operate. They already know
Yeah.
who they are. They understand the game. They're there because they understand the game. The suffering happens in like the actual population of the 95% of the rest of the workforce
Yeah.
where there isn't that reflection. So it's the most important part of this journey. And just obviously me being an insider and an outsider of your experience is the fact that you chose so late in your career and with when you already had all the like you had every choice at your fingertips. You could just sail right out. You could leave any time. You don't have to deal with it to go through this journey. And we'll come back to like obviously how you hooked up with Rachel, how we both all ended up in this room. Is really where the power is at, because what you're doing is actually helping to shift the narrative and the consciousness within the corporation for the future.
Yeah.
Well, and it had to have been that way. It couldn't have started at the beginning. It had to have taken you with all of your skills, with your history, with your lived experience, with your energetic profile to get here to make the huge, like, catalytic change, shaking earthquake change of culture in a huge global corporation that has so much power and holds so much power.
Yeah, the word that that I don't think that you're saying that needs to also be there is credibility, right?
Yes,
I mean,
100.
without credibility in a corporation, right, your ability to influence better outcomes is that much more difficult, right? So,
And it's also like, as my manager,
we're not going to
momager,
cry,
whatever. No, we're not going to cry for like the last 12 years.
Let's let it flow.
But it was just, for like a management or like manager direct report. And granted, there was, I had another leader, and it's very unclear to me actually when I truly reported to you and when I didn't, because I just kind of accepted that it was a constant. It was really, really unique to be able to like witness what was going on in both of our lives from completely different perspectives. And for me, I had to leave that environment to truly stand in my own power and alignment and be like, oh no, like this helped make me who I am, but who I truly am does not fit there.
Yeah. And I
But
told
for
you that.
you, it's been wild to watch because your responsibility, maybe lowercase r, but where you ended up in your own personal responsibility now at the end has more to do with what cultural change you can make than all of the other things that seemed important for years before.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just such an
Truly.
interesting, I mean, I actually sometimes wonder, would either of us be on this path if we had never met?
I mean, I would say no, energetically.
I mean, maybe, but
there's a million possibilities.
But it would have been different.
Yeah,
it would have been different.
I choose not to think about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's probably healthier.
Well, and it's your tenacity, resilience. I mean, it's all these key components that have created your specific leadership style for such a time as this.
Exactly.
Where there is a crack, there is an opening, big corporations, these huge institutions that the world, looks to as these just monsters, and like you don't have any power when you're going against it. Like there is cracks now. They understand that what has been working is not working and will continue not to work in this new kind of paradigm shift that we're seeing come into collective consciousness so rapidly. So it is the perfect time for you specifically and uniquely to shake it up. And I I don't love the sticky situations that you've been in. But I love how you've handled it so consciously, so thoughtfully, so uniquely, you with your special spice and your badassery. And you don't mince words. You don't dim your light. You show up how you show up. And that is exactly what the world needs in every aspect, but especially in these big old corporations at the top.
Yeah.
At the top.
But the thing that Rachel, you and I've talked about that is quite interesting is that I don't believe that I could have the level of impact if I was still in the Charlotte office.
I agree.
It took me going to London, right, which is much smaller, and the problems are more acute because it's much smaller. The credibility that I already had established with everyone in the U.S. helped me be able to find and shine the spotlight on this is not just a local problem. This is a systemic
Mhm.
enterprise problem, and we need to do something about it, right?
So it was like the
Yeah.
micro that you got to see influenced the macro. And because you
Yes.
felt your credibility, your history, your security coming into the London office, you felt the freedom to shake things up a little bit because you felt so secure in who you were, what you
Yeah.
know, what your skills are, what your lack of skills are. I mean, you and I have talked about that too, just being aware of where you need improvement and help and more support and
Yeah.
where your strengths are. And you do such a beautiful job of manipulating all of those things. And you're so upfront about it. It's empowering and it can really be intimidating to some of the leaders that are, older white men that don't think that that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Or I've never experienced most of the things. And I think obviously like what you just described, Angie, about moving from like the big pond to a smaller pond. And that was a pond joke. A little
Oh, that was
pun.
so cute.
Is interesting because I think the bigger the pond sometimes, the more numb you can become to the routines and the cycles and the
Mhm.
habits because you find your small pockets of protection. Or I found that
Yeah.
where I was like, this doesn't seem right, but I'm like safe enough.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm connected enough. I'm leading enough. But from my spot in kind of the center, it was like, I can't deal with these mini earthquakes, and the cracks in this foundation are too much for like my personality and my energy and where I am in my life. And it was when we broke apart what I would call like that bubble of all of us that kind of, I think, just made it seem and feel and look and be a little bit more efficient, a little bit better than maybe the macro.
Yeah.
When you remove out of that and you go to a smaller setting, you feel it so much more.
Exactly.
You can't numb anymore.
Right.
You're so aware. There's nowhere to hide any of the things. There's not enough to like, I guess, like spiritually bypass both like the problems from a work perspective, but like the cultural human problems. And coming out of COVID, all of those things combined have created these like not just mini earthquakes as they were, like these huge tidal waves of just consciousness and change. And like this, how this had been working was not working for everyone. It was
Right.
only working for certain people. And every one of us that participated in that was suffering to
Right.
maintain that.
Yeah. But I would also say, I don't know that it was actually working for anyone.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think that, like you said, the level of numbness, right? Word that was used yesterday, complacent.
Mhm.
Mhm.
He'd become numb to the way that the system was working.
Mhm.
And only when a new co-leader came in with a fresh pair of eyes and started to challenge everything that he was experiencing, oh my goodness, I've just been accepting this,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because you get in that environment and you get beat down and you just go into acceptance.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's such a period of awakening, right? And
Mhm.
I'm part of, as you said, that mom who's shaking everybody awake and saying,
That's right.
Yeah.
do you see what's happening here? Are we okay with this? We should
Yeah.
not be okay with this, right? We have to do something about it, right? And yeah, it was quite encouraging to know that not only do the leaders know that there's a problem, right? But they're also willing to take those hard ones on at this
Yeah.
point. So yeah.
Well, and in our Unleash, Angie, we talked a lot about your genius freak energy codes in your human design. And part of that kind of genius freak mode is being on the leading edge of creation, being the innovators, being the ones that shake things up, which can feel very uneasy, very alone. Kind of, am I the one that's messed up here? Am I the one
Mhm.
misunderstanding? Or is this wrong? And with this situation, that also happened in various levels and degrees and things too. Can you talk to us maybe in the context of this situation that feels so present right now, but also throughout your life, other things that have happened where you've had to be the first one, and what kind of feelings that brings up, what kind of decisions does that make, and how have you kind of evolved over time with that relationship of being the innovator, being the first one, being the leader, and shaking all the things up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Early in my childhood, my mom, and we've talked a lot about this, having been of an era where women didn't think they could
Mm.
without male security, ingrained in me that that could not be my path. My
Mhm.
path had to be one of independence, right? And really depending on myself. And we've talked about how there's positives to that and there's negatives to that.
Right.
So I've always embraced that. And if I was the first, it wasn't because I was trying to be the first, it was because I was really trying to achieve what she had ingrained in me, right? Don't be dependent on anyone else, rely on yourself, and be hugely successful at doing that. And so having said that, I have been the first in a lot of ways, right?
Mhm.
Throughout my career, and even to today in this current situation, I've always known what I was willing to do and what I wasn't willing to do,
Oh, the
right?
Mhm.
boundaries that you've got are
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've always been willing to say no, right? Or yes. Being first can also be, it can be scary,
Yeah.
right? And it is important for me, at least, to have people that I can trust and who I can lean on. And we talked about this current situation and how, in the initial throes of it, I didn't feel like I had anybody I could trust
Yeah.
Yeah.
in London, right? Because those relationships aren't long. Those
Right.
relationships are a year plus,
Mhm.
It's a
right?
risk.
The trust hasn't built yet.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so everybody that I trust is, 7, 8 hours away by plane and 5 hours, in time zone difference. And so finding those people that I trust, that I can lean on as I make those decisions to be the first has been very, very important to me throughout
Mhm.
my career. It was always my mom until my mom passed,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And then I had to find other people who could fill that
Mhm.
space for me. So I don't know if I answered your question, but
Well, yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think you spoke to it a lot. And, you know, you might not feel like you're always the one that's first, but when it comes to things that matter to you and when it comes to things that matter to the collective too, you likely find yourself in those positions.
Yeah,
And, leaning on people that you trust, leaning on your boundaries were two tools that I heard you talk about that
absolutely.
you cling to tremendously. And I think that's really important. And it goes back to corporate, intention of humanity, humans, and are they walking the talk or not? You know firsthand that that is one of the critical components. And especially for you and your energy signature, you have a 4 in your human design profile, and that is all about human connection. And so, how else do you see human connection work with you on that level? Obviously, you
Mm.
want a team of people around you to feel safe and kind of keep you in, maybe accountability,
Mhm.
maybe transparency, but maybe speak a little bit more to how important human connection is in, this area, yes, but all areas of your
Yeah,
life, and how that works for you. And when maybe in contrast, when it wasn't
doesn't.
there.
Yeah.
Or
Or
when
when it doesn't work. Yeah.
doesn't mark. Yeah, I mean, I do need human connection, but I'm not a codependent person, right? I've
Mhm.
Yeah.
lived by myself for many, many years, packed up and moved to London all by myself,
Mhm.
knowing that I wouldn't know a single person. So it's not like a codependent relationship, but human connection is important to me. I think, the work that we've done, Rachel, where I get my energy from and which ones of my sacrals are open and closed. Like you said, I usually already know what my answer is, but I need to sound it out,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And certainly I can talk to myself, but I don't find that as enjoyable as talking to other people. And so I really want those people around me so I can sound it out.
Mhm.
Val calls me her mom, right? And I really do love, and this was, part of my journey that led me to you, is figuring out who I am and what I love. I love really helping other people,
Mhm.
right? And coaching them and nurturing them to be the best that they can be.
Mhm.
And so that human connection is really, really important to me. When it doesn't work, I didn't realize until we started working together how that impacts me.
Mm-hmm.
But, the year before I moved to London, I had a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And the partnership was great in the beginning, but then all of a sudden it didn't feel good, but I
Yeah.
couldn't put my finger on it because he was such a great guy. He checked all the boxes, really cared about his kids, took care of his mom, was responsible, dependable, but there was still this something that was literally killing me,
Yeah.
right? And as we worked together, I realized that, I absorb
Yeah.
energy from the outside through every other sacral in my body, and his energy was oftentimes negative.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like an aha moment for me that, if I'm around people who have a negative outlook, I absorb that, I take that on. And that's why being around him was quite heavy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I literally, I could, it feels extreme to say it this way, but I felt like I was dying.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was heavy. I had low energy because of his negativity.
Yeah.
And I had to let him go. And it was a hard decision, but I told him, I care about you, but this is not going to work, right?
Yeah.
Unless you do work, right? And at that point in his life, he wasn't really ready to do the work. So those are examples of how, being in touch with human beings really can lift me up, create more energy, and that energy then I can give back, in a very positive, healthy way, or being exposed to people who have and put off negative energy.
Yeah.
And so now I'm very conscientious of the people around me. And sorry, if you're giving off a negative vibe,
You're out.
hit the road, Jack.
That's right.
It's
That's right.
interesting, like your question, and then it's also interesting your response, because I mean, all of that makes complete sense. And also having been on like the witness journey with you, like there is such a palpable and visible difference when you are high energy and driving towards something and when you are not, which I think is true for most of us. But like I am energetically in tune more to like you. And then through this journey, it's not I'm a manifestor generator. She's a projector. Yeah.
Yeah. Angie's a
Yes.
projector. So she doesn't have her own source
Which
of
also
energy.
explains
Yeah.
because Kate is a manifestor generator.
Yes.
And Kate was my safe space when I didn't need to or want to explain what I was going through. It was like almost a just telepathic, like, hey, here's where I'm at. This is where I'm going. And it was such ease for me, but it also makes sense because I think she and I have had similar relationships with you.
Yes.
But over time and what I've known about like your history and what you described with your mom, and then knowing your history with your daughter, Ashlyn, and watching that, because relationships between mother and daughter, even if like you love each other, are hard.
Yeah.
And she was growing in a way that was like similar to how your mom set you up of like, you are independent, you can think for yourself. You took it further in breaking certain generational patterns for and with Ashlyn that changed the dynamic. And I would say had the most significant impact on the change in your path and alignment and beliefs and energy, everything, which has just been so interesting to watch. And I try not to like in front of Ashlyn remember the fact that I met her when she was like 12 or 14 and now she's like a full adult that we hired to help us with our business.
Yeah.
And she's so good at it. It was like I had to like also just dissociate myself from that. And I watched you go through that like identification of her as her whole own person and as a teacher to you,
Yeah.
not as a daughter or someone who is a representative of you, which is a generational shift that many people don't ever get to experience.
Yeah.
And that's credit to you both, but you and being like, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah. Listen, we could talk for hours about how grateful I am for the child that I have. But if you want to know what led me to Rachel, quite frankly, set the logistics aside, right? it was my child, right? And you know this, Val, because we worked together. We did Strength Finders. Val has woo in her Strength Finders top 5, and I'm like, I got 0 woo, right? I got 0 woo. And, when I think about woo, it is about the more emotional side of yourself and really being connected to your emotions and listening to them and feeling them and processing them. And, that was the negative part of the lesson that my mom gave me, right? Is that to be independent and be self-sufficient, I had to push down every emotion that I was feeling. It was almost like they were in contrast of each other. And so I grew into an adult woman, pretty high in the numbers of years, right? And didn't know how to feel or process those, right? And I know that sounds quite odd for a woman. That usually is what we say about men, but that is who I
But
was.
you had to start embodying the environment you were in.
Yes. Yeah. But, after I turned into my 50s and I was going through, it was the year of COVID. And I think everybody struggled the year of COVID. And having been this strong woman who persevered lots of things, including, sexual abuse as a child, we're in this period of COVID and Black Lives Matters. And my child is going through this age where all of this stuff is really inciting her, right? And she is just, her emotions are on a scale that is unexplainable. And we're in the same environment together. And I'm absorbing all of this, not knowing anything about my human design and my genetic keys.
And it's amplifying in your system. Not only are you absorbing, but it feels more intense to you than it does to her.
Yes. And I'm just like, holy cow, what is going on? And so I reached out and got a therapist, but that is not the right tool for me, right? It's the right tool for lots of people, including my daughter, but it wasn't the right tool for me. So I went on this journey of trying to find the right tool for me, and not to call you a tool, Rachel. But
I've been called worse, Angie.
There's a positive connotation to tool, right?
That's right.
And so then I found a career coach, and that was great, right? She found, I found some benefit from that, but ended up in, this 2-day goal setting seminar with Lauren Woodrick. Will throw a shout out to her. And then that's when I met Rachel, right? And so if Ashlyn had not helped me realize that I needed to, because she's all in the woo, right? She's doing the meditation, she's doing the yoga, she's reading all the books, she's in my ear saying all of this stuff, and and it's coming in, but it's not really being processed at the time, right? And then I meet you, and you do this Reiki session, and I'm like, wow, this woman is really speaking to me. Like, I was so drawn to you, right? The minute we had a break, Kate and I, who we just talked about, ran straight over, and we were like, we have to know what you do, right? And then it just kind of went from there. It's been over a year and a half now, and I've learned so much more about me and my emotions and my energy and what works and what doesn't work. And so I don't know if Strength Finders changes if you take it again, but I would hope to think that woo is a little bit higher
I would
in
bet.
my rankings than it was early on.
I think on some level you get to define it. I don't know if it would change. We can't probably debate it here, but it'd be interesting for me. And I sent you something the other day that I kept thinking about. And again, kind of details agnostic. There's so much going on right now, astrologically and with energies, that mirrors kind of the 2016 to 2018 kind of chapters. And I'd be interested to hear from you if you are willing. You had trust is very, very important to you. We talked about that first concentric circle, trust relationships. You had a break in trust with somebody that you trusted at that same time. And so we're now living through a moment that's reflecting that. But what you did differently than many other people, though a lot of folks have, is you did this work kind of in the middle. And so you find yourself in another experience where trust is being challenged, safety is kind of challenged. How different did that feel to you being, I'm going to say, resourced by Rachel?
Supported.
But
Right.
also with just your knowing of yourself and like, because truly, like for me, the value of human design and a lot of like, I would say some of the therapeutic work I do, which is more aligned with human design, is like knowing when to pause and be like, what is this emotion? What needs to rise up? How is this showing up? How am I showing up? What's my like DNA responding to versus what is my mind telling me?
Yeah. And I think that talking about it is therapeutic, quite
Mhm.
frankly. It's
Yes.
my human design,
It
right?
is.
Yeah.
I need to talk.
Mhm.
But also I think that it's helpful for other people, right? And that's the phase of the journey of life that I'm on right now, is
Yeah.
helping other people. Yeah. So in that period of time, I worked for someone who I had a 20-year relationship with, right? She was not only my boss at the time, but we had a very personal relationship. Our families knew each other. We were very close on an intimate, emotional level. And she became influenced by someone, and she chose to put my career at jeopardy.
Mhm.
And I was squeezed out of a role that I was quite good at. There was no
Yeah.
legitimate reasons behind squeezing me out. And so my response to that was, I was hurt,
Yeah.
right? And I could not process the why me, the why me, the why me. And I'm going to use this word, which is not a word that I would use with myself very often, but I felt like a victim. I was playing that victim card for a very long time. It
Mhm.
probably took a year and a half before I was even willing to have a conversation with
Mhm.
her,
Mhm.
right? The other two people who were involved, probably because our relationship was not as deep and as long, I was quite willing to just call them out,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
In the moment, how dare you? Who do you think you are? Why do you think you can do this to me? And just really have it out with them. But again, the victim card,
Mhm.
right? Over it now, right? But yeah, recently I've been in a similar situation, not with people who I have that level of trust
Yeah.
in, but where I do feel like I've been wronged, I guess is the right word. But this time it was less about the victim card. Like for 3 days,
Mhm.
it was 3 days. I would say that I was, why me? Like
Mhm.
I'm a good person. I'm doing
Mhm.
this for a good reason. I'm trying to help, yet I'm being attacked in this way. And then I was like, what am I doing? And quickly I went to, why is this happening? Right? So it
Mhm.
was the Friday that I was faced with it. By Sunday, and by the way, I was coming down with COVID and I was really, really sick. But in the midst of all that, I'm really starting to try to process, what is this? And I'm asking Ashlyn, what do you think the universe is trying to tell
Mhm.
me? Like, what is the test here? Like, this is crazy town, 3 days. And then by Wednesday, I was like, I'm giving this no more energy. Like,
Mm.
no more
Yeah.
energy. This will play out the way that it will play out. I'm not in control of it. I don't need to be in control of it. And we'll just let it be what it's going to be. And so I think the difference between then and now is that I'm much more in tune with my emotions, right? And, I'm naming it, I'm processing it. But I'm processing it very, very quickly, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to sit in that negative state. I'm not going to do the woe is me, right? Because that doesn't serve me in any way, shape, or form. And I'm just going to be that positive person that I
Yeah.
am. Like, I am a
Mhm.
positive person. So for me, that was the profound difference, and letting go and letting things just kind of take their natural course with a little, nudge here and there so that it's
Yeah.
not protracted. Yeah, everything's turned out as exactly as it should be. And I was 100% okay,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Because what I figured out along the way is is actually not about me, right?
Mhm.
It is about that person who is operating from a place of fear,
Mhm.
right? Fear does really bad things to people,
Mhm.
right? And I'm not in control of that,
Mhm.
right? And so knowing that I source energy from other people, I was like, yeah, not
Yeah.
taking your
Mhm.
Yeah.
junk into my system. You keep it. I'm going to source good energy. Yeah.
Well, and it sounds like a lot of resilience, trust in yourself, but also in life. That, like you said, things are going to unfold naturally. You don't have to manipulate. You don't have to push. You don't have to have this false sense of urgency where, when we're in fear, that tends to happen, right? We have to protect our ego, even though it doesn't feel like an ego based thing. It's a fear based thing, which drives the ego. And so, with this situation, obviously, there's going to be a range of emotions, or that wouldn't be normal either. You'd be totally bypassing yourself. But what I'm hearing you say is sitting with it, allowing space for it, and then finding your tools, finding your right, like positive mindset path, finding your alignment in your energy, finding your resilience, your trust, your love for yourself, your honoring and self worth in yourself to boundary your energy and show up as your highest self. And
Absolutely.
what a gift to have the contrasting experiences to now embody, because you are a 6 energy in your profile as well. You're a 4-6, so you are a role model. So every story, every experience, every contrasting experience that we wouldn't necessarily want because it's uncomfortable is your kind of, I don't know, curriculum for embodying your role model energy to help
Mhm.
others. Just like you said, you want to help others. And now you're in that time in your life where you just get to be yourself and you can't help but to ripple out help for others.
Yeah, it's interesting. You bring up the role model piece because I had dinner with one of the other folks on my team who is also subjected to what I'm going through. She was sharing with me, right, that this had happened. And she said, I could not believe how amazing you were knowing what you're going through. She said, I literally feel like I learned so much from you on
Mhm.
how to truly be a leader and to let that stuff go for the greater good,
Well, and you
right?
just don't see that in many corporate settings, but also small business settings and also relationships and families. Like our institutions, you just don't see a lot of examples of that.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry that you're the genius freak and you have to go first, but I'm also loving it for you and for all of us because we get your goodness on the other side.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for talking to us today and
Yeah.
being your open booked self and lovely, badass self. And we're so grateful that you took your time, your United States moments with us. And we just love you. And we hope that we can do this again soon, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah.
having me, right? And Val knows how I feel about her, and thank God we made it all the way through without crying.
No, I mean, this should be the moment of power, but I was thinking a little bit about the thing like before we know our human design, before we know some of the answers to the like questions of why, and not the why me, but like why I have certain inclinations, why I show up in certain ways. I went through like a very, very similar experience a couple of years ago, and Angie was my manager. And I specifically, and I was not in a place to lead at that moment. I was in a place where I was like, not victim-y, not I was just like, I need to numb for a period of time to survive. But I remember like the one moment I felt alive in a bad way was similar to what she just described, where there was like kind of a confrontation, like where you have to sit in person, but everyone's pretending like nothing's wrong. And I remember being like, I think it was like almost like a Horcrux moment where like the locket that I was wearing, the necklace, I could feel my heart beating so hard that I was like, I swear to God, it's moving. Like, I swear that everyone in this room can see the like necklace, like shifting. And I made Angie go with me because I was like, I'm having a full stroke right now. And like, it was like my security, which was like kind of your role model moment. You just hadn't arrived in that place for yourself yet.
Mm.
It was something that I could recognize energetically for what I didn't have in the moment.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how we find people, and sometimes, and we talk about this a lot, like sometimes those people become close to us and they become important because like they're part of a lesson that we must have. And I think the hard part with that is letting go of blame and finding the gift in that moment and being like, wow, that was like such a shame because I thought this relationship was something else, but it led me to every good thing that came after that. And so like there's a gratitude in that. But I'm also grateful that Angie and mine, so far at least, is one that's like more long-term. Like those collisions created a more long-term trust and not codependent. And I don't think it's like, it was just a different sort of evolution of trust where we're experiencing on the outside similar challenges that put us on this weird path where we all ended up in this room.
Yeah. And Rachel, I'm forever grateful to you, right? And I think that, I talked a little bit about woo, and anybody that listens to the podcast, if you also are in a place where I was, many years ago and thinking that woo stuff is not for me, what I would say is that I'm still a very practical person, right?
Yeah.
And
all
while
your
I might,
energy is from the neck up.
yeah. And while I might be more in tune with, my emotions, my daughter said 2 weeks ago, can we go back to the time where we just didn't know what emotions were and we didn't name it? Like you are so in your emotion right now. We need to have a break from that.
Yeah.
But what Rachel offers in the human design and why I gravitated toward it so intensely is that it's practical,
It is.
right? You literally can take what you get out of the human design and the coaching sessions and you can put it in practice, right? And so that's what I needed in this space was, get in connection with my emotions, but then how do I turn that into something that's practical, actionable, implementable in my life, right? And I think that that's really what the human design and quite frankly, you as a conduit of that to me has helped me do, right, over the course of the last 18 months. So,
well, I am so grateful that you took a chance on me and followed your curiosity towards this. And I'm so grateful to be on your path, and I love watching you and you inspire me on a daily. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
We love you. Thank you so much for listening to Human Sessions. If you loved this episode, please make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts so more people can join our Human Sessions. We'll see you in the next episode.